Episode 5, Segment 1, Before the Flush, How Humanity Lived Without Toilets. Let's start with a question. Where are you right now? In the car, on the couch, taking a walk, or are you perhaps in the one room we're all about to appreciate a little more? If so, congratulations, you're part of a story that changed the world, one flush at a time, because for most of human history, that room did not exist. No bathroom, no restroom, no water closet, no privy, no latrine, no throne. Humanity managed its waste in ways that by modern standards would be considered both primitive and perilously close to home. Imagine chamber pots emptied out of windows, streets doubling as open sewers, and rivers serving as both drinking water sources and waste disposal sites. It was a world where smell was a constant companion, disease was a frequent visitor, and survival meant adapting to a reality we would find unimaginable today, merged CTA. Now, if this episode makes you look at your bathroom a bit differently or makes you grateful for the quiet, uncelebrated genius of modern plumbing, consider following or subscribing. We dive into these hidden stories of civilization every episode, and trust me, you'll never take that porcelain throne for granted again. Back to the narrative. Long before we had flush toilets, humans found all sorts of ways to handle the unavoidable. In ancient Rome, public latrines were social spaces, stone benches with holes, no partitions, and a shared sponge on a stick as a precursor to toilet paper. The Romans had a rudimentary understanding of sanitation, but their systems were far from perfect. Fast forward to medieval Europe, and you'd find cities that largely abandoned even those early attempts. Waste went into backyard pits, open gutters, or simply out the window. Castles had guardrobes, basically vertical shafts that dropped waste outside the walls or into moats, which were far less romantic and far more hazardous than popular culture suggests. The truth is, people lived with waste in close quarters, not because they were ignorant, but because there was no other option. Sanitation was a concept that hadn't been invented yet. This episode is about how that changed, how we went from a world that accepted filth as normal to one that engineered it away, and in doing so, saved millions of lives. So, wherever you are right now, get comfortable. By the end of this episode, you'll see your bathroom as the quiet hero of modern life. Episode 5, Segment 2, WC, Naming the Problem, Inventing the System. Civilizations rarely change because of comfort. They change because existing habits stop working at scale. And sometime between the 17th and 18th centuries, humanity reached a quiet but critical realization. Human waste was no longer a personal inconvenience. It was a collective engineering problem. The moment this shift occurred can be traced linguistically, not architecturally. Because before pipes, pumps, or public sewers, there was a name. WC. Water closet. Two blunt words that did something revolutionary. They describe process, not politeness. From euphemism to engineering. For centuries, the language surrounding bodily functions was deliberately evasive. As we saw in Segment 1, terms like privy, necessary, and house of office existed to avoid confronting reality directly. But water closet did not hide anything. It stated plainly, there will be water, there will be waste, they will interact, and then they will separate. This was not poetry. It was plumbing logic. Calling it a closet mattered. Closets were indoor, domestic, integrated into buildings. This wasn't a shed at the edge of the property. It wasn't a pit behind the house. This was waste management moving inside civilization, and that required trust. Why? This took so long. The delay was not technical inability. Flush mechanisms had existed in crude forms for centuries. What was missing was a systemic mindset. A toilet by itself is useless. Without sealed pipes, gravity, or pressure, drainage, waste removal downstream, a toilet simply relocates the problem. This is why early flush toilets repeatedly failed socially before they succeeded technically. Early experiments, a flushing idea before its time. In 1596, Sir John Harrington, godson of Elizabeth I, designed one of the first recorded flushing toilets. It used a raised cistern and a valve to release water into a bowl. It worked, but it failed culturally. Why? Because London had no sewers capable of handling it. Smells returned. Through pipes, waste accumulated. Neighbours complained the invention wasn't rejected because it was useless. It was rejected because society wasn't ready to support it. The French solution: furniture over infrastructure. Nowhere was this contradiction more visible than in 18th century France. At the court of Versailles, the most refined aristocracy in Europe lived surrounded by art, philosophy, music, etiquette, and appalling sanitation. Versailles had hundreds of rooms and almost no functional toilets. So French high society improvised. Enter the chaise percée, an elegant armchair with a concealed opening and removable chamber pot, often placed in a boudoir, a private sitting room for women. This was sanitation disguised as furniture. Prominent figures such as Madame de Pompadour, mistress to Louis XV, were known to use these chairs while holding court, receiving guests, and engaging in political conversation. Later, Marie Antoinette owned multiple versions, some fixed, some portable, because the architecture of fashion made traditional facilities impractical. Corsets, hoop skirts, layered gowns, fashion demanded stillness, plumbing demanded movement. Furniture won. But the chaise percée solved nothing at scale. Waste still had to be emptied. Smells persisted. Disease remained untouched. It was a cultural workaround, not a system. Britain takes a different path. While France masked the problem with refinement, Britain began to industrialize. Industrialization changed everything. Factories concentrated workers. Tenements packed families together. Urban density exploded. And suddenly the waste problem became impossible to ignore. By the late 18th century, inventors began refining flush technology with practicality in mind. In 1775, Alexander Cummings patented the S-trap, a curved pipe that retained water and prevented sewer gases from entering homes. This single innovation solved one of the biggest objections to indoor toilets: smell. Shortly after, Joseph Bremer improved the design with a sliding valve that sealed more effectively and resisted freezing. Now, for the first time, the water closet began to make sense as part of a system. But adoption remained slow. Fear, class, and resistance. The wealthy resisted because indoor toilets were associated with industrial housing, plumbing failures were expensive, old habits felt safer. The poor resisted because landlords didn't invest, maintenance was unreliable, shared facilities bred conflict, and governments resisted because sewers cost money, responsibility was unclear, disease was still poorly understood. So WC existed, but unevenly. The language shift matters. Still, something irreversible had happened. Once waste had a technical name, it could be regulated. Once it could be regulated, it could be standardized. Once standardized, it could be scaled. This is why WC survives linguistically long after other euphemisms faded. It represents the moment society stopped pretending waste was a private embarrassment and accepted that it was a shared risk. And once that idea took hold, the next step was inevitable, because naming the system exposed its weakest point. If waste leaves the house, where does it go next? That question would force cities to rebuild themselves from below. Episode 5, Segment 3, Inventors, Resistance, and the Dangerous Half Solution. By the early 19th century, the toilet itself was no longer the problem. The mechanisms worked, the designs existed, the engineering principles were understood. What failed repeatedly was everything around it, because a toilet without infrastructure is not a solution, it is a liability. And history learned this lesson the hard way. The illusion of progress. After the introduction of the water closet, many believed the sanitation problem was solved. Waste flushed away, smells reduced, homes appeared cleaner. But the question no one wanted to ask, at least not loudly, was simple: a way to where? In most cities, flushed waste did not disappear. It moved from homes into cesspits, from cesspits into shallow drains, from drains into rivers, and often right back into drinking water. Early WCs didn't remove waste from cities, they concentrated it. Cesspits, the silent urban bomb before modern sewers. Most cities relied on cesspits, underground chambers where waste accumulated. In theory, they were emptied periodically. In reality, they leaked, they overflowed, they contaminated groundwater. London alone had hundreds of thousands of cesspits by the early 1800s. As flush toilets became more common, these pits filled faster than ever before. The result was paradoxical: cleaner homes, deadlier cities, class divides and sanitation inequality. Sanitation was never evenly distributed. The wealthy installed private WCs and paid for emptying services. The poor relied on shared privies, overflowing pits or open drains. Tenement buildings often housed dozens of families with a single toilet, or none at all. This wasn't neglect, it was economics. Landlords avoided plumbing costs. Cities avoided responsibility. Disease filled the gap. Cholera arrives. Then came cholera. First appearing in Europe in the early 19th century, cholera spread rapidly through contaminated water. London suffered major outbreaks in 1832, 1848, 49, 1853, 54. Tens of thousands died. The disease was swift, terrifying, and misunderstood. Victims dehydrated rapidly, skin turning bluish from fluid loss, earning cholera the nickname the Blue Death. Still, authorities blamed bad air, moral weakness, poverty itself, not water. Edwin Chadwick and the sanitation argument. One of the first people to understand that sanitation was a systemic issue was Edwin Chadwick, a British social reformer. In 1842, he published the Report on the Sanitary Condition of the Labouring Population of Great Britain. His conclusion was blunt: filth caused disease, disease caused poverty, sanitation saved money. Chadwick was not motivated by compassion alone. He was motivated by efficiency. Healthy workers were productive workers. Still, his proposals were controversial. Why? Because sanitation required taxes, government oversight, public works on an unprecedented scale. Many objected on principle: John Snow and the water truth. The real breakthrough came during the 1854 cholera outbreak in London. While most doctors still believed in miasma, one physician disagreed. John Snow suspected water. He mapped cholera cases around a public pump on Broad Street, now Broadwick Street. The clustering was unmistakable. When the pump handle was removed, cases declined sharply. This moment is often cited as the birth of modern epidemiology. But here's the important part. Snow didn't just prove cholera was waterborne, he proved that partial sanitation solutions were deadly. Flush toilets plus contaminated water systems equals sign, accelerated disease spread, the Great Stink of 1858. If science didn't convince politicians, smell finally did. In the summer of 1858, London experienced what became known as the Great Stink. Hot weather intensified the odour of untreated sewage flowing through the Thames. Parliament nearly shut down. Curtains were soaked in chloride of lime to block the smell. Only then did political resistance collapse. When the stench reached lawmakers directly, sanitation became urgent. Joseph Bazalgette and the sewer solution. The man who finally turned toilets into a public health success was Joseph Bazalgette, chief engineer of London's Metropolitan Board of Works. Bazalgette didn't redesign toilets, he redesigned the city. Between 1859 and 1875, London built over 1,300 miles of sewers, massive embankments, pumping stations, intercepting systems that carried waste away from drinking water. His genius lay in over-engineering. Bazalgette doubled pipe diameters to account for future growth. That decision saved millions of lives, literally. The lesson of segment 3. This is the uncomfortable truth. The toilet alone did not save humanity. In fact, early toilets killed people faster when paired with ignorance and half-built systems. Progress required data engineering, political will, massive public investment. Once waste left the home, society had to decide who takes responsibility next. That question reshaped cities, governments, and public health forever. And once the sewer systems were in place, the impact became undeniable. Episode 5, Segment 4. The Sanitation Revolution: How Toilets Saved Millions. History often celebrates breakthroughs that are loud. Wars, revolutions, discoveries announced with flags, speeches, and monuments. The sanitation revolution was none of those things. It happened underground. And yet, it may be the single greatest life-saving transformation humanity ever experienced. Before sanitation, a world designed to lose children. To understand the scale of what changed, we need to understand what life looked like before it did. In the early 19th century, urban life expectancy in Europe hovered between 30 and 40 years. This was not because adults routinely died at 40. It was because so many children never survived long enough to become adults. In cities like London, Paris, and Berlin, infant mortality often exceeded 30–40%. Waterborne diseases were endemic. Diarrheal illness was a leading cause of death. Clean water was rare. Contaminated water was normal. And toilets, when they existed, often made contamination worse. The turning point: systems, not devices. The true sanitation revolution did not begin with the toilet bowl. It began when cities accepted a radical idea. Waste removal is a public responsibility, not a private inconvenience. This shift occurred unevenly, but once it began, the results were immediate and measurable. London as the proof case. After Joseph Bazalgette completed London's modern sewer system in the 1860s, something extraordinary happened. Cholera disappeared, not declined, not diminished, vanished. London had suffered repeated cholera epidemics for decades. After the sewers, no major cholera outbreaks returned. Typhoid rates dropped sharply. Dysentery cases fell. Infant survival rates climbed. This was not coincidence, it was causality. Life expectancy jumps quietly. Between 1850 and 1900, life expectancy in major European cities increased by 10–20 years. Importantly, these gains occurred before antibiotics, before modern vaccines, before advanced medical care. The biggest driver was sanitation: clean water in, wastewater out. The toilet became a hinge point between biology and civilization. Louis Pasteur, germ theory, and validation sanitation worked even before science fully explained why. But in the late 19th century, germ theory provided confirmation. Scientists like Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch demonstrated that microorganisms, not bad air, caused disease. Suddenly, what engineers had built made biological sense. The toilet wasn't just removing waste, it was breaking transmission chains, global evidence, same pattern, same result. This wasn't unique to Britain. Wherever modern sanitation was introduced, mortality dropped. Epidemics retreated. Cities expanded safely in the United States. Major sewer projects in cities like New York City and Chicago led to dramatic declines in typhoid fever by the early 20th century. In Germany, municipal water treatment combined with toilets transformed urban health within a generation. In Japan, rapid sanitation adoption during the Meiji period contributed significantly to population health improvements. The pattern was universal. Sanitation worked everywhere. Humans lived densely. Toilets versus medicine, an uncomfortable comparison. Here is a fact that still surprises many people. Public sanitation saved more lives than most medical interventions. Antibiotics saved individuals. Vaccines prevented specific diseases. But sanitation removed entire categories of illness. Diarrheal disease alone killed millions annually before sanitation became widespread. Once toilets and clean water systems were introduced, those deaths simply stopped. No drama, no cure announcements, just absence. Wide toilets enabled modern cities without toilets and sewers. Skyscrapers are impossible, subways are impossible, hospitals are death traps, dense populations collapse under disease. Sanitation is the invisible scaffolding of urban life. Every modern city rests on it. A revolution without heroes. The sanitation revolution produced no conquering generals. Its heroes were engineers, clerks, inspectors, pipe layers, municipal planners, people whose names rarely appear in textbooks, yet their work doubled life expectancy in some regions. The numbers humanity rarely celebrates. By the early 20th century, child mortality had dropped dramatically. Epidemics no longer defined city life. Population growth accelerated safely. Modern civilization became biologically sustainable, not because humans became smarter, but because waste stopped poisoning water, the central truth of segment 4. If electricity powers civilization and agriculture feeds it, sanitation keeps it alive. The toilet did not merely improve quality of life, it transformed survival itself. And yet, even today, its importance is often underestimated, which brings us to the final and most uncomfortable realization, because for all its success, the sanitation revolution is still incomplete. Episode 5, segment 5, the quiet machine that saved the world and still hasn't reached everyone. If history rewarded impact instead of spectacle, the toilet would have monuments in every capital city on Earth. It does not. There are statues to generals, names carved for kings, museums dedicated to weapons, but no holidays for sanitation. And yet, by every measurable standard, the toilet changed human survival more than most things we celebrate. A victory so complete we forgot the enemy. In cities with modern sanitation, entire categories of death disappeared, not declined, not reduced, removed. Cholera stopped being a seasonal terror. Typhoid became rare. Dysentery lost its inevitability. The absence was so total that later generations forgot what had been defeated. This is the paradox of successful infrastructure. When it works perfectly, it becomes invisible. The modern blind spot. Because here is the uncomfortable truth. Sanitation feels solved only if you already have it. According to the World Health Organization and UNICEF, billions of people today still live without access to safely managed sanitation. As of the early 21st century, over 3.5 billion people lack safely managed sanitation services. Hundreds of millions still practice open defecation. Waterborne disease remains a leading cause of child mortality globally. This is not ancient history, it is now. Same problem, same outcome. Where sanitation fails, the pattern repeats. Contaminated water, preventable disease, high infant mortality, stunted economic development. The science is settled, the engineering is known, the cost is measurable. What remains is political will. Why toilets still matter in the 21st century? Modern threats may look different. Climate stress, urban overcrowding, informal settlements, refugee crises. But sanitation remains the foundation. Without it, hospitals amplify disease, schools lose attendance, cities become fragile, healthcare costs explode. Toilets are not luxuries, they are biological firewalls. The final irony? Most of human history was spent solving this problem. Most of modern history forgets it was ever a problem at all. We celebrate innovation while sitting on it. Reflection. So wherever you were listening from when this episode began, the car, the couch, the street, or that most private of rooms, you were surrounded by one of humanity's greatest achievements. Not glamorous, not heroic, but life-saving. If this episode changed the way you think about something ordinary, share it with someone else who might never look at a bathroom the same way again, and tell us, where were you when you listened? Because civilization isn't just built on ideas, sometimes it's built on pipes, and the quiet decision to keep waste away from people. If you enjoyed this journey into the hidden forces that shaped our world, make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, and join us for more stories of the ordinary inventions that changed everything.